guys, welcome to one of my favorite places, Kaka'ako, for viewing and filming and recording both graffiti and murals. It's one of the best places on the island for it, I tell you. You can't, every week you come down here, you will find at least a new one, if not small, something even larger. But this is one of the best places for it, so welcome. We're gonna go around and take a little tour of the new developed Kaka'ako, because I used to come down here a lot back when I was on the island before I left in 2019. And there are a whole lot more here than I remember from then. So join me and hopefully we will get into some really good shots, all right? And a conversation, so stick around for that too. Take a look at that guy up there in the distance on the parking lot. I'll share some shots of him later, but just one of many. When was the last time you made an assumption and then later on questioned that assumption because you realized that you could have been or probably was wrong initially? When was the last time you did that? Good question, huh? I would venture a guess that out of every 3 or 4 assumptions that we make per day, we're probably wrong 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 4. We're probably wrong. And I'll get to why that is significant, that we do question our assumptions. Obviously, they can become very problematic when you're talking about people's character and good name. So tell me, what's the difference between this and this? You would argue that one is graffiti and one is art. But what if I told you that they're both art and that one is just a misunderstanding of the artist, or that we don't want to necessarily agree with the struggle of the artist? And then further, what if I told you that the same person that created this? What if I told you that? That, my friends, is the fallacy of our making assumptions. And I said earlier that they're very dangerous, and they are, because I'm going to share 3 anecdotal stories with you that hopefully will put it a little bit more in perspective for you, if not what I've already said. And in some respects, they're all funny, especially the one that happened specifically to me. I was a witness to 2, but had one actually happen to me. And I'll save that one for last because, like I said, it's got a little bit of humor in it. But seriously, the first one was, and I'll put out a caveat before I get started here, for my friends that are in Asia and are members of this channel and will watch this video, I in no way want to be disrespectful in the story I'm going to share. It is just that it occurred, and it's troubling, at least to me, and I'm just trying to find answers. All right, so with that caveat, just understand that this is in no way an attempt to be disrespectful to any culture. That said, when we first got to Sri Lanka, I would sit on the porch in the mornings with the pup and have coffee and sometimes even talk to some of the neighbors as they go by. And for the first couple of months, nothing interesting really happened except for some really, really curious birds that I've got some pictures of too, and I'll share them with you on another episode, because this episode is primarily based on our assumptions, and I think that you will start to gather by now why I used murals and graffiti as the theme. Anyway, before I get too distracted, I would sit there, and after about the first couple of months, I noticed that there was a local guy that would come down the road, and in the most haste, he would pick the flowers of the plumeria tree that was there right outside of our residence. And just for context, the tree was not on the property of the other U.S. resident that lived across from us. It was in the street, and 90% of it hung in the street, and the other 10% in that yard. Anyway, I would notice that when he came to pick the flowers, he would be in quite a hurry, and I thought maybe he's just in a hurry to get to as many flowers as possible. Fast forward, and about 3 months into us being there, I noticed that the neighbors started to chase him off. And curious me just one day asked, "Hey, why are you guys chasing off the flower picker?" And I was told, folks, that I need to be careful of those people because they're basically on recon, and that they're thieves and they're just looking over the fence to come back and steal property. I followed that up with, has this particular guy ever been seen reconning any house on the street or stealing anything for that matter? And I was told, don't worry about that, they've done it in the past. And again, I pressed, has this particular guy done it? And what makes him a thief by picking the plumeria flowers? And they told me that only drug addicts and thieves forage for flowers in this particular country. Folks, I find that hard to believe. In the general area where we lived, conservatively, there had to be 10 temples within a 2-mile radius. 10. I bring that up because in the temples, flowers are the main thing, because most of this country are Buddhist. So it's all about flowers. Anyway, I said, really? Only drug addicts and thieves forage for fruit and flowers? And I was told, yes, just be careful, look out for these guys. Folks, I could not take that as gold. So I asked our driver at the time, hoping for a new perspective. And for brevity, he told me the same thing. Only drug addicts and thieves forage for flowers. I still don't believe that, folks. We're talking about Asia. Asia. And I think it is just that my neighbors had their own set of biases, because outside of the fact that he was picking flowers, not dressed to the nines, there was no other evidence, not even evidence that I've seen on, and you have, of what a drug addict looks like. And looks are deceiving, and I didn't see that, folks. I didn't even see that. My point is, there was no grounds other than they just felt that, and there's a lot of classism in this country, okay? So keep that in mind. And I think that is what is at the base of what I observed. Classism. The fact that he was just not good enough to be on that street, and the plumerias were too good for him. I just don't understand it. But I'll leave that one up to you, because I really don't want to insult any cultures. I find it hard to believe that in Asia, only drug addicts and thieves forage for flowers and fruit, because I saw fruit foragers too, and they weren't being chased off. They were actually foraging for that fruit that hung over in the streets. Similar laws as here in the US. If it's hanging in the general populace, you can pick. The minute you violate the person's property by climbing the fence or jumping the fence or leaning over the fence to forage, now you have stepped over the line. But until then, you're just foraging. Anyway, fast forward to one that included family of mine, and I'll leave the family member nameless. But we were out on a trip, and we were just driving around, and we came to an intersection. And at the intersection, just to give you perspective, think of a four-way intersection. We're sitting, let's say, facing this direction, and off to our left, we could see a little tent encampment, homeless tent encampment. And there were some folks that were changing clothes, not to the point where they were exposing themselves to the public, but switching between the tents and making sure that they were in fact hidden by the tents and the trees. One of the occupants of the car that I was traveling in made the comment, this comment: "I bet you they're getting ready to go beg." I can't make it up, folks. And it wasn't funny then, and it's still not funny now. If I don't laugh, I might cry, because I still don't get it. I don't get it. Again, I gave you the setup. Tents, people changing clothes, and obviously homeless. That's the setup. The person in the car had nothing else to go on, but their first assumption was they're getting dressed to go beg. So I came back with this question: how do you know they're not getting dressed to go to work? And I think in part embarrassed that they were challenged, their response was, "I was just joking." And like I told you earlier, I don't see the humor. I don't see the humor, because there was no reason to make that comment other than our inner insular thinking, our biases, that everything that our eyes first see must be what it is. And I'm telling you that that in and of itself is incorrect. Our first observations do not provide us enough information to make critical, formal decisions, especially those that are about people, about their cultures, about them, about their names, about their actions, simply because it is outside of what we call value added to us. Our insular thinking, that's selfishness. But yes, so that occupant, that family member of mine, could not explain why they made that observation and assumption as their first. And of course, when challenged, could not defend it. All right? And that brings me to the one that occurred to me, or I should say I was involved in directly. And this happened back in Missouri. I was out for a workout, and this was in the middle of the day, folks. I put my backpack on, I had headphones in and music, and I was just doing a run-walk routine throughout my neighborhood. And my neighborhood is, I call it probably one of the largest cul-de-sacs I've ever seen, because it really is just a cul-de-sac, right? Again, which means that the assumption, and here we go with assumptions, or at least my assumptions, because I'm human in my bias. My assumption was, because of the fact it's a cul-de-sac, and I ran and walked my pup so often around this neighborhood, I should be known. My assumption is that I should be known. Well, folks, that is inaccurate, because after I came back from my workout, I was in my driveway and I was stretching, and I noticed the sheriff's car driving down to the cul-de-sac within a cul-de-sac, because I lived on a cul-de-sac. But I paid no really attention to it because it's the sheriff. I don't really have to pay much attention to it. He went down and turned around in the cul-de-sac and came back up the street. And when he came back up the street, he stopped at my mailbox and he put his window down and he said, "Hey, sir, were you just running?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, someone called." Folks, I cannot make this up. He said someone called and said they saw me and I looked hot. Now, this isn't the hot, like good looking, sexy hot. This is hot as in I needed some refreshments. If that is true, why did they call the cops to give me refreshment? Why didn't they just come out and say, "Hey, neighbor, pull over. You look beat, dehydrated, you need some hydration"? No. Instead, the cops were called, folks, because there was a black man running in the neighborhood with a backpack on and shades in the middle of the day. Okay? Because I still to this day feel bad for the sheriff having to make up that lie about being called about someone being hot. It was nothing more than someone called because I looked suspicious. Anyway, I told the sheriff I was fine and I'm home now. Thanks. And I gave him that look like, yeah, I feel for you. We exchanged pleasantries about service and he went on his way and I went on mine. Folks, I laughed a lot through that episode, and I did when it occurred too. But later on that evening, I thought about it with my wife when she made me reorient myself and look at it from a different angle. And I did an episode on what ifs before, and you can check it out. But what if they had made commands, and because I had my headphones in and I listened to my music fairly loudly during workouts, I'm not proud of it, but I do. Well, what if they had made commands and I did not hear those commands and the situation somehow had escalated? And I bring that up because at the time that this occurred, this was during Ferguson in Missouri. So, and if you haven't gotten the context yet, my neighborhood, or I should have shared that with you, my neighborhood is predominantly Caucasians with a lot of military mixed in. So it really surprised me that that occurred there. But folks, what if? What if they had made commands, I did not hear them, and their reaction was more reactive, or not being level-head cops and drew different assumptions? Or I'm making assumptions here because what if they'd showed up earlier? I'm saying that based on if they were there, and they weren't. They showed up clearly after I was done. But what if it showed up during? The point, folks, is our assumptions can be dangerous. We have to make sure we have all of the material we need, all the resources, all the evidence we need. And I get it. Some assumptions, you say, Warren, come on, some assumptions are necessary. I get it. In a life and death situation where you're in a parking lot and you can tell this is a bad situation, there is a mugging about to happen because things just don't look and feel right. Maybe, yes, it's time to get in your car and leave hastily. But in and of itself, our assumptions, on an average, are based on our biases. And as aspiring good Renaissance men especially, we need to stop doing that. We can't keep using the excuses that we use, like they looked a certain way, they were acting a certain way, they dressed a certain way, and as such, that is why I made the assumption I made. It is dangerous, it is reckless, and as aspiring Renaissance men and women trying to live more purposefully and a better life, I say we like our assumptions about art. Our theme here, graffiti over art with the murals. I hope I've made the point that some of our assumptions are just that, assumptions that are baseless, and as such make us look less empathetic than we're really trying to be. All right, so keep that in mind. Until our next conversation, be good out there, take care of yourselves, and we'll talk then. All right, see you soon.